Well, you mentioned my first interview with Peter Karran, and he said he wanted to talk about Lib Vans while he was here, and particularly the Southern branch.
Yeah.
What's this, a recruitment drive you want to talk about? I mean, how are you doing as a party?
Well, obviously it's always difficult, and the fact
Why?
is...
Why is it difficult?
Oh, I think because at the end of the day, the real poverty hasn't hit yet. You know what I mean? And what we've got to do is, and of course the media give the impression that you can't do anything about it, it's impossible to change things, and it isn't. If I'd have said the things that I said today that are the reality of the Isle of Man 40 years ago, they'd have locked you up as a lunatic. And remember, we only released the unmarried mothers in 1987. I mean, I can remember being attacked for promoting promiscuity, for bringing about free family planning.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And things like that. Today it would be seen as norm.
Okay, we're drifting already, which is interesting. You blame the media quite often for things. What are they? You think they're too controlled? I mean, is this because of government money going to them, or what?
The problem is that it's very difficult. I mean, it's very difficult.
I'm the only one that doesn't take anything from anybody, by the way.
Well, that's good to hear.
Well,
but I mean, the problem is that they use the institutions of government and their finance as a weapon against people. And that's where, I mean, at the moment, if haven't got yourself on the tit of a government feed policy, you're struggling out there at the moment. You know, this situation, and it's unsustainable. It was unsustainable when we tried to get a national government of national unity to deal with things. I mean, that's why I did the prescore. Because the fact was, it needed to be outside the public sector. We needed to put a proper voucher scheme in it. And I will never forgive the politicians for delaying that implementation, because that caused a lot of pain that was unnecessary. But it was all about soiling me. But then I spent a lifetime being soiled upon.
I was going to say your presence is missed in a sense from the fireworks that sometimes were going off.
Well, it's not about...
You were challenging people a lot, weren't you?
Well, the problem was, I was there to serve them, not serve myself. Yeah. And the point is, you know, I'm very proud of my non-achievements over the years.
You're proud of your non-achievements?
Yes.
You say that?
Well, of course, I wouldn't get any credit for lots of things I did. I mean, you know, I brought in the 5% on VAT on home improvements. I told them we're a bunch of idiots. They were worried about fish and chips. That 5% on VAT was so important. It helped us decimate the black economy. I had the officers telling me, do you know, Mr. Karran, we've actually get more money out of 5% than we do out of 15% of the time. I said, you know that. I was a joiner. I know how it was at the beginning of the 80s.
Have a cash deal rather than put it through the books, you mean? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's the way it works. And the problem is, it's about fair competition. And it's about, I've for years battled about the issue of apprentices and about having people on the cards. How are you supposed to tender fairly if one lot can do it all on the lump and the other lot, and government shouldn't be allowing its spending power to be abused like that as far as these contracts.
Government's huge. I mean, and how many people work in government? It seems to be going up and up and up at the minute, doesn't it? And it's not the nurses necessarily where you think we need it. It's
of course it isn't.
It's civil servants who are running.
Who are making the strategic policy? The strategic policy is being made by the civil servants.
In your view, and not only your view, but it shouldn't be like that, obviously. Let's get back to where we were. The Southern Lib Van. Where are we going with this?
Well, what we want is we have our meetings on the first Wednesday a month in the Port St Mary Station Hotel at 7:30. We want to see people there. We want to try and create the institutions of good governance.
You've opened a can now that I've got a question on. I mean, how many people are members of Lib Van? How many, you got branches in Ramsey, have you, Douglas?
We had about 7 at the last meeting. I'm not. In the southern branch.
7 members.
I think 7 or 8. It's not a lot. Begging to share. Little by little, it gets better. The Labour Party in the 70s. I was the youngest there by about 50 years when I first, and then Bernie May came to the meetings, and then David Cretney came to the meetings, and the age profile was horrendous. And and one of the things that people need to remember is I was horrified as a teenager going to meetings and sitting with people who ended up in jail for their trade union rights. And we've already seen what's happened in Britain with the black shirts and the Tories, in the fact that they're now trying to restrict protest and all this. It's not that long ago that, trade unions, and it's like the boat in the morning. The boat in the morning was never for come-overs. The boat in the morning was for trade unions, for anybody who didn't go along with the local mafia.
Okay, how many members of Lib Van are there on the island?
Well, I don't know, to be honest. I would imagine about 40.
I mean, and you've got branches in Ramsey, Douglas, whatever?
No, we've got branches in the south, and we've got a branch in Douglas.
Right.
So the point is, it's about the enthusiasm, and it's about getting people together to try and create the institutions of good governance for change.
Right, and now is the point, surely, if there's dissatisfaction with the government, this should be booming. You should be having a lot of people knocking on your door.
Well, I think you've got to remember that in the UK, you've got this media situation in the UK where people, you can't do nothing. If we had all took notice of that, we wouldn't have free family time. We wouldn't have a welfare state. We wouldn't have the things that we've got today. We wouldn't have got the grant system when they brought in the loan system. But it's the political will has to be there, and they need to stop this dumbing down and saying they can't do nothing, even though I can't understand anyone voting for a Conservative in the UK unless you're on at least 50 grand a year.
Now, you've got it's 2 members in Tynwald, isn't it?
No, we've got 1 member in Tynwald. We've got Laurie Hooper, who's in government.
I thought there was another one. Okay. Oh, that's the Labour Party, of course, isn't it? Yeah, it's right, confusing. So that's not great, is it? I mean, if you want to change the world.
Well, the point is, it's about building up the party. That's what the issue's about, and that's what we've got to try and do. And instead of trying to undermine and rubbish the situation is we desperately need the institutions of good governance. At the last branch meeting, we've called on Laurie to look at the issue of when we did the 5%. It ended up because two knock-kneed politicians and civil servants, they only put it on hotel beds. We should be putting 5% on all tourist infrastructure.
It has to be non-transferable goods. I'm pretty sure. Remember, it has to be limited to things like hotel rooms, things that can't get moved. Yeah.
Well, the point is that we've done it on building. It's just nonsense.
Okay.
Just the usual political, and because of the lack of resources by people to actually hold the government to account, they get away with saying black is purple with pink spots.
How do you deal with Laurie Hooper? That's probably the wrong way of putting it. He's a member of your party, very much so, obviously, but he's also now a minister, and he's moved around a bit.
Well, look, the point is that what we've got to try and do is we've got the same problem with the Labour Party. We've got Cretney's daughter in Treasury, and so consequently it must be so frustrating for Jodie, to be honest with you. And as I say, she's a breath of fresh air, that girl. Do you know what I mean? The point is, what we've got to try and do is we've got to try and get away from this one-party state by patronage. People are not going to do what I did. We had members of Tynwald who had more air miles than an astronaut, and I wouldn't send them to represent me buying a pint of milk. Now, the point is, what we've got to get away from is we've got to balance it up. If and to be fair, they have took some of the initiatives that I wanted. They did away with the 30%, and that was used as a weapon to control people, that you're going to lose 30% of your wages if you didn't go along with what the Coleman did. That has been addressed, but there's still a lot more patronage to go on.
Do you think there's ever going to be a Lib Van government on the Isle of Man, or a Labour one, or something? In other words, party politics proper arriving here?
The fact is, Paul, we were the balance of power in the late 80s between the fascists and the Tories, and we backed Moulton. and we got 80 years
The
worth
hang of the fascists. Come
well,
on.
let's be honest about it. Well, people, when I tried to make it illegal again to sell unroadworthy vehicles,
Yeah.
they were arguing, we can't do that. What will the poor people drive? That's in thing.
I'm not sure it's fascist, though. I mean, come on.
Well, no, I'm sorry. The situation is that you've got an extreme right wing.
Yeah.
We see the permanently attack of human rights. We're seeing the permanent attack on demonisation. I mean, I get annoyed with the likes of these immigrants. What annoys me is we were the immigrants. I was the first generation that wasn't an economic refugee to Britain. Or to Australia or New Zealand, and that's why there's more Manx blood off Ireland than there is on Ireland. Now, we changed that, and that's why I've said in the previous interview about the issues of the economic engines and the sustainability of such an incompetent government that has turned it into an art form.
So who would you have running it? Laurie Hooper, presumably. You'd want him as the chief minister and full of your people, no doubt, right?
I would want Laurie Hooper, and I want a Liberal Party being held to account in the Parliamentary Party by its membership. That's what's lacking at the moment.
So when Laurie Hooper says he wants transparency and openness and all these things, and we sat in this room when he was the health minister at that time when the whole thing was going on with Ranson, and he couldn't talk to me about anything because it was all sub judice or the courts were dealing with it.
Yeah, but you know the law, don't you?
Yeah,
you know the law. You're just playing games there. You know the reality of it. How many times in the years that I've been threatened, as I say, they'll have me effing house off me from some of the ministers. Yeah. People don't see that. They don't, and it's fair enough. I never had a wife or a rent boy or whatever, so it didn't matter. My people told me back in the mid-70s, your son, don't waste your time. Go and have a nice life. If you're going to go into the House of Keys, you've got to have no business interest. And remember, in them days, it was effectively a pay cut to become an MHK because you made your money out of your directorships and your perks, as I say. Now, we changed that, and to give credit where credit is due, Charlie Carrouche should be applauded for that, because there's no excuse now for people being greedy. There's a good pension scheme, there's a good wage there for working class people to get in there and represent the people that need representing.
Okay. Just to finish with, back to your Lib Van Southern thing. You want more members, right? Let's try and help you.
Yeah, we do, and that's why.
How do they get in touch? What do they do? Go to the website.
Well, they go to the website. They'll be more than welcome. The next meeting we're discussing whether we should be trying to find out a way of developing an independent body to actually do a time and motion on the senior civil service.
Ooh, good luck on that.
Well, I know. And the problem will
Turkeys
be...
don't vote for Christmas, do they?
No, but it's not the turkeys. It should be the politicians that be making that decision. And they're not being the ones... But we can't afford to run the way we are running. And what worries me, and it's been worrying me for 10 years, is what we're going to see is a fire sale. And we're going to see the freedom to flourish for the few, to fleece the rest of us. And what will happen is the assets will go off to different people. It was like we were talking about before the other week about the talking about the issue of the government mortgage and the housing crisis. Mm-hmm. If there's a will, they can do it. They can bring in legislation on banks and other things willy-nilly, read 3 readings through the House when there's political will. Now, there needs to be a political will on starting to be an effective, efficient government. We do not want to end up with a national debt like the United Kingdom. We can avoid it. We want to stop the nonsense. Well, I had one of the many financial scandals where we were actually paying more out in management fees than we were getting in interest on government funds investments.
It's fascinating to talk to you, as always. Come back and one more time, if you want to join the Lib Vans, you want to get involved in politics. And let's face it, it may not be your particular brand, it may be another person's. More people being active would be good, wouldn't it, in
Absolutely.
politics?
But for the Labour Party and for the Green Party, we need the institutions of good governance. What we've got to get away from this nonsense about everything left is right and everything right is wrong. What we've got to get away from is this polarisation of demonising you. What we need in politics is fair and just. Fair and just. That's what we need.